Olson Center. See how ordinary Christians choose courage in a culture that needs truth. Watch Truth Rising starting September 5th and find out how you can be a part of the change and become an agent of restoration. Sign up at truthrising.com. That's truthrising.com.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. Today is Wednesday, August 20th, and so much going on around the country, but especially in my home state, the free state of Florida. So let's welcome in the best governor in the country, my home state of Florida's governor, Governor Ron DeSantis, who has just been absolutely killing it with wins. Florida is the best state, of course, in my opinion, but I think in a lot of American conservatives' opinion. We want America to look like Florida, and there have been some really big wins out of Florida over the last couple of weeks. And Governor, this also last week you appointed Senator Jay Collins to now Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins. I think this was a phenomenal choice. Why did you pick him, and what is the plan for Florida's future?
Well, he's got a fantastic record, Jay Collins does, and he could be a fantastic governor should the need arise, which is obviously the most important criteria. But this is a guy that served 23 years in the Green Berets, Army Special Forces. He was wounded in action along the way and lost one of his legs. And rather than medically retire, he requalified as a Green Beret using a prosthetic leg and served 5 more years. Not many people would do that, but he's also been one of our most consistently conservative fighter state senators. All the big wins we've had, whether it's pro-life legislation, whether it's eliminating ESG, DEI, whether it's our strong stance on illegal immigration, doing things like building Alligator Alcatraz, he has been there with me every step of the way. And Jenna, you followed. Not every Republican has wanted to do what our voters want us to do, and we've gotten pushback when we're trying to be bold. And Jay has never wavered. He runs into fights. And get a load of this. When the Iran-Israel conflict broke out, we had a lot of Floridians in Israel who were stranded. The airport was closed. There's ballistic missiles raining down. A lot of people were worried, so I authorized Florida to conduct rescue operations. And we were able to bring thousands of people safely out of Israel, flew many of them back to Florida. Then Senator Collins, he flew to Israel. He was on the ground in Israel and Jordan. He's personally rescuing these folks and then bringing them to safety. And so I say he's the Chuck Norris of Florida politics.
I love it. We need to meme that, and I think that would go viral very quickly. And this is a great pick. And so, of course, Floridians like myself who moved there because of your leadership, people who've been there actually through a lot of the Rhino leadership, but then now love what you've done, are very concerned about Florida's future. And so when you are termed out, is this handing the reins off to now Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins? Or what's your plan and desire for Florida's future?
Well, my criteria for appointing him was, one, I wanted someone with a demonstrated conservative record, and he basically has a spotless record. I mean, there's not been one fight that he hasn't been willing to do. And then, two, I wanted somebody that had the leadership capability to actually serve as governor should that need arise. And so, obviously, he's asked, I think a lot of people are like saying, hey, you got to run, because they see his story, they see his record, and most people in Florida didn't know who he was prior to last week. Now more people are getting to know him, and they feel like this is a type of inspirational leadership that they can do. So he's going to be making decisions about what he's going to do in terms of campaigns. But I will just tell you, I would not have appointed him lieutenant governor if I wasn't confident that he would be somebody that would not only continue Florida's success, but build on it and take it to new levels. And a lot of people who've looked to Florida Florida around the country and a lot of people inside Florida who appreciate about what we've done to lead on all these key conservative issues, just know there's a lot of people who are on the inside who've resisted all of this. None of them supported me during COVID when we were fighting Fauci. None of them supported me when we were standing up against things like DEI. None of them supported me when we were going to ban sanctuary cities. These are insiders who will do better if Florida was a purple state. So that impulse is there, and I think people who don't like the direction, because it's just like, we have some people that they would rather Democrats do better. It's really incredible to see some of the stuff that I've seen, but just understand there's a lot of hostility and resistance within so-called Republican insider circles to all of the Florida achievements. I think they liked us better when we were purple state.
And isn't that sad? That reminds me of what's going on in Texas right now, where you have so-called Republicans in leadership, but they're appointing Democrats to leadership positions, and Texans are thinking, what are you doing? And of course, in Florida, the true conservatives are incredibly grateful that the state policy is conservative, that your leadership is conservative, and we're thinking what's going on in the state legislature. And so forecasting ahead to the next legislative session, I know you, I think, well enough, and now Lieutenant Governor Collins well enough, and your great executive team to know that you are not going to have anything close to a lame duck last session that you're governor. You're going to continue to crank out the wins. So what would you like to see for the session coming up, and what are you working on?
Well, the number one thing we need to do is work with the legislature to put on the November 2026 ballot a measure that would allow Floridians to vote to protect their personal residence from property taxes. It's my view that to truly own your own home, you shouldn't have to pay rent to the government just to live on the property that you supposedly own. And so that would be a huge, huge step forward for taxpayers. It's something that we've shown can be done because we're doging these local governments, and we're exposing, that they're spending money on a lot of things other than public safety, education, and things we all agree on. That can't be done by normal legislation, which is why we got to go to the ballot and change the Constitution. All property tax in Florida is administered by local governments. The rates are set by local governments, and the revenue flows to local governments. So we don't use property tax revenue at the state level. We're funded by sales tax and some other stuff. We run big surpluses. We pay down debt. We're fine, but people need relief from property taxes, especially as their properties get assessed higher. When you have an increase in the real estate market, these property assessors, they're quick to go out and assess your property higher. If the market goes down, they're not as interested in assessing your property lower. And so you're basically talking about an unrealized gain. You bought it for $300,000. Now they're telling you 5 years later it's worth $750,000. Well, you haven't sold it for $750,000, and yet they're taxing you on that different value. So I think that's going to be the preeminent issue for Floridians to be able to consider in 2026. The other thing that we're going to be doing, and the contours of that are still be determined, is redistricting. So we had a redistricting battle in 22 in Florida. I had to go against the legislature. I vetoed their map. We got our map. The Florida Supreme Court upheld the map that I signed into law, but also provided some commentary that shows, hey, there may be some additional changes we need. We also may get another seat if the Trump administration reevaluates the census, because even Biden admitted we should have had more seats. And then you have the U.S. Supreme Court doing the constitutionality of the Voting Rights Act, which I think may be adjudicated by the end of the year, the beginning of next year. So I think the redistricting thing is going to be huge. We're definitely going to be in that fight. The contours of that, I think, is still to be determined.
And of course, Governor Gavin Newsom out of California, who you, in my opinion, soundly defeated in the debate. It was a beautiful moment holding up the poop map. That was my favorite moment of the whole thing. But if you're the greatest of all time, I think he's the worst of all time. And he is already pushing back and saying that the Republicans just want to steal the election, and, redistricting and gerrymandering is something that we shouldn't be doing. Meanwhile, he's in California. I mean, they've been doing this for a long time. And so overall, what's the pushback to those claims that the Democrats are already laying the groundwork for?
So first of all, California is brutally gerrymandered in favor of Democrats. And what they'll say is California has an independent commission. Now, they do have a commission, but who's on that commission? It's hardwired to help the Democrats. They have liberal Democrats on the commission, liberal independents, and very liberal Republicans from like Berkeley and places like that. So the whole thing is hardwired. They are very gerrymandered right now. He's trying to gerrymander it even worse in favor of the Democrats. But, you know, if we did the right thing and only counted lawful persons and didn't count illegal aliens in the census, California would lose like 4 or 5 seats because so much of their population is based on them counting, you know, all the illegal aliens. So he has a gerrymandered map. He's trying to do it more. I think it's going to fail because I think even Californians see that this is basically a ruse, and he's just trying to posture and try to get more attention to make himself, to raise his profile nationally. I don't think he's going to be successful, though.
Hopefully not, and I hope that Congress and also the Florida state legislature, Texas, and other red states around the country will see how important it is just to get this right. I mean, the census obviously had flaws that were in favor of Democrats, and if we're truly in support of the aspects of democracy embedded in our constitutional republic, we should want the maps to reflect the electoral count and the constituency. I mean, that just makes sense not to be so gerrymandered like California. But speaking of the upcoming legislative session, there's also been this story, Governor DeSantis, in the news of this illegal who came into America allegedly in 2018 and then somehow obtained a commercial driver's license, or CDL, out of California, then is driving in Florida, has an illegal U-turn, and just absolute tragedy, kills 3 people. And this is something that is clearly directly the fault of California for providing licenses to non-citizens, to illegals. So what can Florida do about this? I mean, I don't think the founders ever intended the Commerce Clause or the Full Faith and Credit Clause or anything to contemplate things like this.
So Florida, we already ban driver's licenses for illegal aliens. We also ban recognition of driver's license for illegal aliens issued by other states. So if an illegal gets a driver's license in California and they come to Florida and they seek recognition, we don't do it. We also ban local governments from issuing identification cards to illegals, and even NGOs, because the NGOs want to issue them ID. So we've made it to where operating in Florida as an illegal is going to be very difficult because you're not going to have access to things like IDs. Now, in California, they issue driver's licenses to illegals as a matter of course. They would not have been able to, of course, get a driver's license in Florida. So how they ended up getting the CDL, I don't think this guy even spoke English, so we're doing investigation. He's going to end up facing criminal charges. He may be in prison for a very, very long time. Once he finishes that, he'll be deported, and the Trump administration has given us his assurances on that. But what did the company know? What was the company's role? That's something that Florida is going to be investigating. And then what was the role of California, and what is the recourse for one state versus another state when you have those types of sanctuary policies? I mean, those sanctuary policies, it's not just been bad for California. It's part of the reason so many people have fled California. It's bad for the country. And when you have a state, the biggest state is a sanctuary state, that impacts other states throughout these United States. So I think that, what we really need is we need Congress to crack down on sanctuary jurisdictions. Why is the federal government funding sanctuary states? Why are they funding sanctuary cities? They need to defund them immediately.
Absolutely. And you used to be in Congress, so you're very well aware of all of the politics that go on there. And we have a Republican trifecta right now. This Congress should be just passing legislation after legislation and letting President Trump sign bill after bill that accomplishes all of these things. But it seems like it's so difficult for Congress right now to even get on board with President Trump's agenda. And yes, it's a very slim majority. But what do you think is going on in Congress that they're not at least doing some of these things that are obvious a little more rapidly?
Well, this slim majority to me is a red herring because look at when Biden came in. They had 50 senators. They had a very narrow narrow majority in the House. You never heard anything about a slim majority because they jammed through everything and then some. And Biden, his policies were very bad, but man, they were spending a lot of money. Man, they were pushing a lot of stuff through. So that never stopped the Democrats. And so I think the question is no Republican can run for office in a Republican primary and say they support funding sanctuary states and sanctuary cities. Yet when it comes down to actually voting to defund sanctuary states and sanctuary cities, somehow they can't muster 218 votes in the U.S. House of Representatives. So I think there's always been, in both Republicans in Washington for the last couple decades, there's been a disconnect between the rhetoric that they employ at home to get nominated and to get elected, and then their actions once they're in Washington, D.C. They just don't follow through on the campaign promises that they make when they're seeking people's votes. And it's part of the reason why people have been so frustrated with Congress. Honestly, it's part of the reason why I'm such a big proponent of term limits for members of Congress, and we're working with other states to certify that amendment under Article 5 of the Constitution. It's another reason why I want a balanced budget amendment for the Constitution, because I don't think Congress is ever going to discipline itself. I think you got to kneecap their ability to bankrupt the country. So it's been disappointing. There's obviously a lot more that can and should be done. I mean, if nothing else, why are they not voting on codifying the Donald Trump executive orders across a wide range of its subjects that have been very important and very popular with not just Republican voters, but with other voters nationwide? So you only get one shot at this. We don't know what's going to happen in the midterms. I mean, history suggests the other party is going to make gains. We don't have very many. We have a very slim House majority. And guess what? If the Democrats take over, do you think they're going to want to work with President Trump on anything? No. They're going to probably try to trump up another impeachment or something like that. So I just think these guys, haven't shown a sense of urgency. I think there's so much that we want to see get done. I know they're on vacation for all of August. Man, I'd like to see them make the Democrats take tough vote after tough vote.
Absolutely. And Governor DeSantis, you've mentioned kind of the same problem in the Florida legislature that's also reflected in Congress, that, we the people vote these individuals into office thinking they're conservatives, thinking that their campaign promises are what they're going to take to office. And then they get there and they're basically rhinos, Republicans in name only. And so what should voters look for on the campaign trail and in primaries, which is probably the biggest piece of this, to actually be able to distinguish the difference at that level, so then when we actually get to the people in office, we don't have happen what's currently going on?
Well, I think what happened in the Florida legislature, I think if you look at like the Florida House of Representatives, I think a lot of those rank and file folks are conservatives. I think that they do believe in the agenda that's been successful in Florida. I think that's what they ran on. But when you have the leadership led by the Speaker of the House that was trying to jam an agenda that was foreign to what we had all campaigned on. And so the question is, are you going to stand up against the leadership knowing that they're going to punish you, they'll take away your appropriations, they'll take away your bills, or do you just say, you know what, I'm going to vote because the Speaker is telling me I got to vote this way? And my view on that is you were elected by the people of your districts to represent them. You were not elected to represent the Speaker of the House. So the times when the House was running aground this most recent session, when I proposed a special session at the beginning of the year, I came on and talked with you about it to deal with illegal immigration, to make sure we were helping President Trump with the deportations. The Speaker of the House rejected it initially, said it was premature and it could wait. And I'm thinking, wait, we had 4 years of an open border. We don't have time to wait. We need to be on this ball. And we eventually won that fight. But you think about it, no Republican would run on being soft on illegal immigration. They all said they were going to take care of it. And yet when I called for it, I got resistance from the House leadership. They tried to roll back our higher ed, anti-woke higher ed reforms. And it failed because the people spoke up, but it did. They tried to roll back some of our tort reform, which has helped stabilize and actually bring decreases in things like auto insurance. Again, they didn't run on that. That was something that special interest, I think, had really pushed forward. So when your agenda is contrary to what you ran on, I think the question for the individual members is, are you going to side with the leadership or are you going to side with your voters? And yes, when you step out and you're not following the leadership, when they're wrong, you can face consequences, and I get it, and it's not fun, but that's really what leadership's about. If it was easy to lead, everyone would do it, right? And so there are times when you have to do it. So I think most of these guys in the Florida House are good, solid, conservative folks, but I do think they got a lot of pressure to kind of vote contrary to their constituents in this most recent legislative session, and I know a lot of them haven't been happy about how all that went down.
Well, thank you so much, Governor DeSantis, for being such a great leader in Florida. I know you have another interview to get to, so we'll wrap here, but I so appreciate it, and I know that our American Family Radio Network base just loves and appreciates you, and we are praying for you. Continue to lead strong and look forward to talking with you again soon. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Well, that was Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis on so many things, and I think he's absolutely right that we have to hold our elected officials accountable for actually doing what they say they would do. And we need to take a moment and appreciate how important the primaries are, especially in selecting the best leaders for these positions. So we will be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
Hi, my name's Neil. I have some advice for you if you've been trying to break free from credit card debt. You can start by doing what I did. Get your bills together and call Trinity Debt Management. Trinity is dedicated to helping people like me become debt-free. When I called, my first experience was a feeling of relief. My counselor was kind, and best of all, she didn't judge me. In just a few minutes, she helped me figure out a plan that consolidated all my bills into one lower monthly payment. This substantially reduced my high interest rates and put me on the road to success. In the end, I saved thousands in interest, and today, my credit card debt is a thing of the past.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Neil. Take it from someone who's been there. Call Trinity and become debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
How about this? Some actual good news on the healthcare front, even as costs just keep skyrocketing. So if you're 65 or older, MediShare now offers MediShare 65 Plus. Call them. You can talk to them about this. A lot of people are taking advantage of this now because even if you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are out-of-pocket things, deductibles and copays that just keep going up. And the whole point is to help you by giving you a low, consistent monthly payment that fills in the gaps. In fact, I can tell you how much MediShare 65 Plus is. For example, it's $99 a month up to age 75. It keeps costs under control. That helps with peace of mind. MediShare is trusted, too. It's been around for 30 years, and it's a community of people who help each other. Business owners, retirees, pastors, teachers. People love being part of it. Here's the number you can call now. They are easy to talk to. Call 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE. 833-45-BIBLE.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. A senior at Grand Island High School in New York wanted to decorate her parking spot with a Bible reference and a cross. The decoration is part of a long-standing tradition for teens. The school district encourages seniors to express themselves, but they can't express themselves with Bible verses. Sabrina Steffens was told by school leaders her design had been rejected because she mentioned phrases like God is love. She also included John 3:16 and a cross. The school explained the parking spot was on school property and therefore she could not mention anything about her Christian faith. They also told her that if they approved a cross, they would also have to approve a satanic symbol. Well, First Liberty Institute's representing Sabrina, they say public schools must be neutral when it comes to religion, and that means the school cannot infringe upon a student's faith, and it's unconstitutional to stifle religious messages. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, there is a huge redistricting battle shaping up to potentially impact the composition of Congress for the midterms. And this of course, comes in the wake of the Texas Republican-led mid-decade redistricting. So Republican lawmakers, of course, in the Texas House have been pushing for a redraw of the congressional maps. This is before the usual post-census redistricting aimed at adding 5 new Republican-leaning districts, strengthening the GOP control ahead of the 2020 midterms. Over 50 Democrat legislators, of course, staged that 2-week walkout. Now they've come back, and there's a lot going on. We're going to talk to Texas Representative Brian Harrison more about Texas specifically in the next segment. But California is now countering with a redistricting proposal. So in response to Texas, Governor Gavin Newsom and Democrat leaders are proposing their own mid-decade redistricting via legislation, and this is dubbed Proposition 50, or the quote-unquote Election Rigging Response Act, and it proposes overriding California's Independent Redistricting Commission and enacting Democrat-favoring maps subject to voter approval in a 2025 special election. So this is going to be very interesting to see Texas and California, what the two states do, and then, of course, the litigation that I'm sure will flow out of this. So let's welcome in a former Congressman, Bob Good. He is from the great state of Virginia. And, Bob, this just seems like a huge disaster.
Well, Republicans are finally catching up with Democrats in terms of wielding political power for partisan gain. The Democrats have been doing it for years, and you have to look no further than the congressional delegation makeup in these blue states. In New England, where you've got the 6 New England states, it's 21-0. Maine is a competitive state. New Hampshire is a competitive state, and yet there's no Republican representation in all of New England. It's 21-0. California, the one that you were talking about, over 80% of the congressional members are Democrats. It's 43-9. I don't know if they have as much opportunity as Texas does. I'll confess I don't know the details of each district there in the state of California and Texas, but Texas is 26-12 Republican, so not even quite 70% Republican delegate members. But in California, it's over 80%, 43-9. But it's worse in other states. Illinois 14-3, Maryland 7-1, Oregon 5-1, Washington 8-2. So you've got 80-90% representation with Democrats, or 100% in New England. It's about time Republicans catch up. You know, Florida's only 20-8. Texas is only 26-12, again in that 70% range. So it's time that Republicans unapologetically and unashamedly use the power that voters entrust them in their respective states. It's different rules per state on how they do it, but we need to stop apologizing for using political power.
Yeah, well said. And I think that's what a lot of the voters in Texas, and certainly the Republican voters, were excited to see the Republicans actually stepping up. And whether this will end up passing and Republicans will continue to grow their spine there, we'll wait and see. But what about the counter arguments to say, well, if everybody just continues to gerrymander and wield their political power, I mean, just because the Democrats do it doesn't mean the Republicans should. Is this overall the best model for drawing district maps to begin with?
Well, you can't unilaterally disarm. Obviously, in a perfect world, if we had people of integrity in elected office throughout the country, which is sad that we don't, that's a conversation for another time. You know, if men were angels, James Madison famously said we wouldn't need all these laws, but men are not, so we need to have laws in place for those who are not. But ideally, maps would just be drawn geographically. They would make sense geographically. You wouldn't, have these crazy designs and these crazy configurations for partisan purposes. But the founders didn't, give control of that to Congress. They gave control of elections to the respective states. They gave very basic rules from a federal level in terms of that a census has to be done at least every 10 years, but it can be done more often. And some states redo their census or their districts every year even, or every 2 years. And Kathy Hochul, the governor up in New York, is a terrible, obviously, example of this. When she's such a hypocrite, she's criticizing what Texas is doing, but she did it last year. They did it in Texas last year. That resulted in 3 Republican incumbents losing by redrawn districts, gerrymandered districts up in New York. So it's happening all over the country, more so on the Democrat side. You cannot show these numbers that I'm talking about on the Republican side as consistently. These are states, even California, where Republicans have 40% of the voters or so, but they've got some less than 20% of the congressional representation because of what Democrats have done. So Republicans need to unfortunately play the same game. They can't unilaterally disarm. In a perfect world, they would just be drawn straight geographically and let the chips fall where they may. You wouldn't worry about the race makeup of the people in the respective, states and so forth. You would just let them make sense geographically. That's best for the constituents, for the citizens to have access to their elected officials. But unfortunately, that's not the system that we have.
Yeah, and it is unfortunate that we're so far down the line here, and I think that's really reflected in the battle that's going on. And you mentioned the census that President Trump has called for, and to be used for congressional apportionment that would explicitly exclude illegal immigrants, which that was the fight in 2020, and the original census absolutely shouldn't have included that. There was some litigation around that. But if Republicans continue on this, I mean, you've mentioned Democrats have been doing this for a long time, but they're frankly better than we are at some of these legal challenges. Where do you expect then the challenges to go if Texas does end up redrawing their maps and apportioning, maybe 5 new GOP favored seats to Congress?
Well, it is risky when you do. This is not a perfect science. Sometimes it can backfire. Then you make Republican districts less Republican, and you can lose a seat in a blue wave. But I think President Trump is right to fight against illegal aliens being included in the census, and he is right to call for a new, accurate census. Again, the Constitution says you have to have a census every 10 years, but it doesn't say you can't have one more often than that. And these illegals that are included result in how big cities having more representation congressionally within the state, but also blue states having more representatives generally. And it's allowed states like California to keep more of their seats than they should have, and it's penalized other states that should have more when they don't have the illegals as many included in that population. So President Trump is right to do it. It'll be obviously legally challenged by courts, by Democrats. That's what they do. Is they challenge everything in the courts that Republicans do in office. But I hope that will prevail. I think President Trump is right to pursue that. I think he's also right to criticize mass unsolicited mail ballots. There's a number of ways to cheat elections, and that's, of course, third-party ballot handling, ballot harvesting, drop boxes away from polling places, unsolicited mass mail ballots, and President Trump is right to attack that and to criticize it. I'm not sure that he'll be able to prevent it because, again, the Constitution doesn't give Congress the control of the respective state elections. It gives the states the control for that in the Constitution.
And
but
so
it does say that election day. It does say that Congress can set the date, the time, and the manner of the election. It does set the time. It ought to be election day. It ought not to be election season. And that's something where Congress can act.
Right, 100%. I'm speaking with former Congressman Bob Good, who was the chair of the Freedom Caucus and knows a lot about this whole redistricting battle, the issues involved, and as this continues, and the feasibility of this is really a return to federalism and actually allowing the states to maybe run things differently and not just have the overarching control that everything has to look the same, and going back actually to the language of the Constitution. So with the current Supreme Court makeup, would you anticipate that this current Supreme Court, which tends to be more conservative, even though we've talked about this before, I think it's more of a 3-3-3 split of, 3 actual conservatives, 3 kind of mid, we're not really sure, where they're going to land on each particular issue, and then 3 leftists. Do you think that they will, if this comes before them, would hold in favor of a return to federalism and state authority?
Well, to the point that you were making, the founders intended that the states would be part of the checks and balances on the federal government. The state would be a counterbalance to the federal government, and they wanted to balance the power between the states and the federal government, and really to have more power, as you know, pushed down to the individual, to the local government, and to the state government, and away from Washington. I think this Supreme Court, at the risk of predicting what the Supreme Court will do, I think this Supreme Court would recognize the power of the states, the autonomy of the states to make decisions for themselves on how they conduct their elections, as long as they're not doing things from a racial discriminatory standpoint. Of course, that would be permitted. and as long as they're operating within the limited boundaries of the Constitution, which are very limited. And so I think that the Supreme Court would allow states to draw districts the way that states see fit, unless it was demonstrated they were doing it for racist purposes or something discriminatory to that effect.
Yeah, one last question for you, Congressman Bob Good. So this isn't just about having more seats in Congress. Ultimately, this also affects the Electoral College. And so that's been a big issue as well, and was something, obviously, that the 2020 census contemplated, and there's been a lot of commentary over that. How would this, if Texas was able to do this and Republicans actually figured out how to fight fire with fire, how might this affect the Electoral College in 2028?
Well, to your point, the Electoral College is the accumulation of the congressional seats plus the Senate seats. So a state that has one congressional seat and obviously two senators has 3 electoral votes. So the real impact of that would be the census itself, not so much the redistricting on the Electoral College, but the census itself, in terms of how many seats are apportioned based on the population and based on whether non-citizens or illegals are included in the counting of the census. And that's something that Democrats have fought for, of course. They don't want a citizenship requirement on a question, I should say, on the census, because then they say, well, then non-citizens won't participate if they have to answer whether or not they're a citizen. But Republicans have fought for only citizens to be included in apportionment in the number of seats in Congress and therefore in the Electoral College that a seat gets, and that's the way that it should be.
Yeah, well, really well said, and a lot to contemplate here. We've got to leave it there, but former Congressman Bob Good, always appreciate your insights in your program, and you have a new podcast. Tell us where we can find that.
America podcast. Thanks for asking about that. We started a couple of months ago, and you can find it on, of course, Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, major place where podcasts are listed. Good for America. Please check us out. Thank you, Jenna.
Awesome. Absolutely. I listened to it. I think it's phenomenal, and I really appreciate you continuing to provide all these great insights. So we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
Every weekday, strengthen your family and your faith with Family Talk.
I had the same brain when I was at the bottom of the class that I had at the top of the class. Exactly the same brain, but a different attitude. What does that tell us about our responsibility to develop the intellect of the people in our spheres of influence?
Don't miss Family Talk with Dr. James Dobson every weekday at 6:30 a.m. and 9:30 p.m. Central on AFR. We see and hear about the big public issues happening in our nation's capital, but what about the things that happen behind the scenes? That information can give us the whole story and help shape our opinions. That's why you need to listen to Washington Watch Weekend with Tony Perkins. He and his guests will give you all parts of the Washington news from a conservative Christian perspective. Catch Washington Watch Weekend Saturdays at 5:05 a.m. and 6 p.m. Central, and Sunday mornings at 3 Central on AFR.
For certain persons have crept in unnoticed, ungodly persons who turn the grace of our God into licentiousness. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Regressive pastor and Texas state legislator James Tallarico was interviewed by Joe Rogan. During the conversation, I couldn't help the hissing sound that seemed to accompany Tallarico's talking snake-like presentation, during which he argued with a straight face that Christians need to consider support for homosexuality and abortion. He attempted to present himself as the Hegelian dialectical reasonable man with a reasonable perspective. He is a modern example of the false brethren and false teachers the Lord warned us about through the Apostle Jude and others in Scripture. False teachers twist God's holy word.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
Hi, I'm Jan Harper. If you are a pastor's wife, Come be encouraged and renewed as you share your challenges and stresses unique to pastors and their wives.
The AFA Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat is coming October 28th through the 30th. You're invited to join us at Pickwick Landing State Park in Counce, Tennessee for 3 days of encouragement, renewal, and worship. Once again, Brother Bert Harper, AFA Director of Family and Pastoral Ministries, will host the retreat along with his wife Jan. Our special speaker will be J.J. Jasper of American Family Radio. If you've attended in the past, we'd love to see you again. And if you've never experienced a fishbowl retreat, we especially invite you to be refreshed and renewed. The per-couple admission price includes lodging, meals, and materials. Visit repairingthefoundations.net to learn more and register. That's repairingthefoundations.net.
The AFA Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat. We'd love to see you there.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. So we're continuing to talk about this whole redistricting fight that is centered, at least for the GOP, in the state of Texas. And ABC News reporting this morning, first domino in national redistricting fight likely to fall with Texas GOP poised to vote on the map. So the Texas's Republican-led legislature is expected to approve the new congressional maps that add 5 new House seats that the GOP could win. So let's welcome in Representative Brian Harrison from the great state of Texas for an update. So, Brian, you have been following this and putting out really good videos on social media. Everyone should follow your X account to get information there on what's going on. So give us an update on what's going on in this fight, as well as the accountability for the derelict Democrats who walked out.
Yeah, Jenna, always great to be with you. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have much of an update on the accountability or the punishment for the 50-something Democrats that fled the state, because unfortunately, the Republican leadership in the state of Texas is incredibly weak, and actually most of the Republican leadership in Texas has been in league with the radical Democrats for almost 2 decades. I call it the uniparty down here. They're really indistinguishable. So I'll start with the punishments, then go to the update. And upon the punishments, the governor 2.5 weeks ago promised any Democrat that was had not returned by 3 p.m. on Monday 2.5 weeks ago would lose their job, and their seats would be vacated, and they'd be kicked out of the legislature. To date, he has asked the court to think about maybe having an opinion on whether one Democrat should maybe at some point in time have to argue to not lose their seat. So absolutely nothing from the governor. The Speaker of the House issued arrest warrants 2 weeks ago. 0 arrests. Not one Democrat has had their legislation killed. In fact, the returning Democrats, multiple of them, are having their legislation, you're not going to believe this, their legislation, these quorum prioritized and fast-tracked ahead of Republicans who did not flee the state. So no punishments of any kind that matter whatsoever. And the one thing that I actually really, really wanted to have done, if Republicans in Texas were playing hardball, and I know you had Governor DeSantis on a little bit before me, I mean, he's demonstrating bold leadership in the state of Florida. Leadership, quite frankly, we need more of here in Texas. But we should have played hardball with these Democrats. I mean, Gavin Newsom's going to further gerrymander his state. I mean, Massachusetts doesn't have a single Republican state, but they're saying they're going to, or district, but they're going to gerrymander even further. We should have, for every 1 week the Democrats were gone, we should have added another Republican seat to the map. I'm tired of Democrats fighting harder and more aggressively for the future than Republicans, but it sounds like we're not going to do anything that matters to the Democrats. The map, even though, the governor was parroting my talking points a couple days ago on, Fox News and other places, saying we can add more seats. He even said up to 9 or 10. I really view it as capitulation that we're only adding 5. But all that notwithstanding, it does look like the maps are going to be on the floor in the Texas House today. The Democrats came back of their own free will, on their own timeline and on their own terms. Republicans did not force them back. And we're going to probably vote on the maps today. I would expect a lot of very terrible, bad kabuki theater from the Democrats screaming about how racist and discriminatory and unfair and all the complete nonsense that about what Republicans are doing in Texas. And it's nonsense, it's cynical, it's dishonest, because they didn't say a word about any Democrat governor in any Democrat state who has been much more radical and aggressive in their redistricting efforts than Texas. I mean, they've been hiding behind Governor Pritzker in Illinois for 2 weeks, and that guy's got the single most gerrymandered state in America. 45% of the vote in Illinois is Republican, but he only gives Republicans 15% of the congressional seats. Same thing in California. Newsom's got, 42% of his voters are Republicans, but he only gives them Republicans 17% of the seats, and he's going to take that down to, 5% if you believe what he's threatening out there, and I tend to believe him. So the updates are Texas is finally going to get around doing something that Democrat states have been doing for many, many years and passing a map that is more appropriate and more in line with what the Republican voters in the state of Texas want to have happen. And my guess is that will happen relatively quickly after we gavel in on the floor at 10 a.m. Central today.
All right. Well, Representative Brian Harrison, so I guess, maybe a mediocre win, if we can frame it that way, to say there's at least some good news coming out of Texas, but not the best that it could be. And, former Congressman Bob Good joined me just in the last segment, and, his take on all of this is, as I think exactly in line with yours, that Republicans need to start doing what Democrats have been doing for a really long time, which is wielding their political power when they can and to fight fire with fire. And so why is it that Republicans are so hesitant to say, let's take 10 seats then if we can and push this, because Democrats have been trying to do that, and they've been doing that effectively for so long. And I know some of the response of, the conservative overall is to say, well, this isn't really the point, and, we need to play fair. Well, the Democrats aren't playing fair.
No, that's exactly right, Jenna. And it was a real shock to me. After I moved back, native multi-generation Texan, grew up here. I love this state, worked here, but I worked in the Trump administration in his first term, and I moved home and I got elected to the Texas legislature. Nothing could have prepared me for the shock that I experienced when I learned that even though voters give Republicans massive majorities in the Texas House, Texas Senate, we got a Republican governor in the governor's office, Republican vice lieutenant governor. The elected Republicans in Texas, for decades now, voluntarily cede their power to the Democrats, let them chair our powerful committees. I mean, as you and I speak right now, Jenna, the most powerful person in the Texas House is a Barack Obama White House lawyer who's our parliamentarian. I mean, the chief advisor to the speaker on issues of quorum is an Obama staffer. So Republicans and Democrats are supposedly fighting each other in the battle for the future, to shape the future for the next generation. But for the 4 years that I've been in Texas, I've only seen one political party using every tool at their disposal to win that war, and it has not been the Republican Party. And I'm sick and tired of Democrats, especially Democrats in Texas, fighting harder for the future than the elected Republicans have. And that's exactly what we've got going on down in Texas with incredibly weak Republican leadership. Because if this trend continues, Jenna, freedom and liberty that we hold dear, that our forefathers and the generations that came before us believed in so much that they were willing to fight, and many of them pay the ultimate price to protect for us, is going to be lost if we do not combat with every appropriate, and I'm saying be appropriate, be legal, be constitutional, even though the Democrats don't care about such things. They are constrained by nothing. Okay, Republicans, we at least need to use every tool available to us under our federal and state constitutional structures to thwart the designs of these socialist, Marxist, leftist extremists that have taken over the Democrat Party, that do not believe in individual freedom, that do not believe in a one-size-fits-all, cradle-to-grave, nanny-state government where we're supposed to trade our freedoms and our individuality and our independence and our liberties in exchange for the promise of some great big government socialist utopia that has resulted only in mass chaos, death, and destruction everywhere it's been tried throughout human history. The Democrats are the embodiment of those failed policies, and unfortunately, we have weak, spineless Republicans in D.C. and as well in Texas that don't fight as hard. So yes, thank you to the pressure of President Trump and other national Republicans, the state of Texas is going to make some marginal improvements in our redistricting map. But the fact that it took this long and this much of a fight, when you've seen Democrats been doing this for 10, 20 years, is emblematic of the bigger crisis we're facing, not just in Texas, but in America, where Republicans do not understand what time it is, and they don't have the appreciation for the stakes going forward that, unfortunately, the Democrat Party absolutely has an understanding of.
And to your point, Representative Brian Harrison, my special guest this morning, follow him on X at Brian E. Harrison. See all of his videos there that he's updating you. That's exactly the focus of where Republicans should be when you said we should fight, conservatives should fight with every tool available under the federal and state constitution that it's allowed. I mean, nobody that I have seen in terms of, Republicans and conservatives are advocating extra constitutional measures. I mean, everybody's saying fight within the bounds of the law, obviously, but we're not fighting up to those bounds. Everybody's saying, well, pull back. We don't want to use that. That's just going, too far. And so they're leaving options on the table instead of going as far as they could and using every tool available, unlike someone like Governor DeSantis, and that's why he has so many significant wins in the state of Florida. So why aren't Republicans in the state of Texas willing to do that and in Congress overall? Because, so for example, you guys are back in session, and there has been no change to any that I'm aware of, correct me if I'm wrong, of any of these Democrats that are in leadership positions, their committee appointments, anything like that could be easily done by the Texas legislature.
No, absolutely. There's a lot to unpack in that question, but I'll start off with what you said about Governor DeSantis in Florida. People are talking about people are constantly talking about the bold leadership coming out of the state of Florida because of the aggressive, legal, but aggressive actions taken without fear by Governor DeSantis. When was the last time, and I say this with all kinds of embarrassment and anger, when was the last time national conservatives talked to Texas leading on anything? You have to go back many, many years to find some example. Certainly, we've led on not a single thing in the 4 years that I've been in the Texas legislature. So that's number one. I mean, I'm a proud Texan. I know people in Florida might disagree, but I think Texas should be the number one state in America for freedom and liberty and bold conservative values. That's objectively not true. Florida's running circles around us. And to your other point about it doesn't seem like anything has happened to the Democrats. It doesn't seem like the tools that are legal and constitutional and available to the elected leadership in Texas, our governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker, were employed in this redistricting battle. And this redistricting fight with the Democrats is a perfect sort of case study, and it's emblematic of the broader failures of Republicans to fight fire with fire. For example, why did Governor Abbott, why has he still not promised to kill, for as long as he's governor, veto any bill by any of those Democrats that fled the state? That's fully within his political power and authorities to do so, but he didn't do that. Why did Lieutenant Governor Patrick not promise, as the head of the Texas Senate, to make sure that no bill by any of these rogue Democrats ever got through the Senate? Why didn't the Speaker remove, people are going to be shocked to learn this, Democrats chair committees in the Texas House? I mean, imagine if Nancy Pelosi was the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, or if AOC was chair of Energy and Commerce. That is literally what happens in the Texas House. But you know what? Not one Democrat chairman has had their chairmanship stripped. Our Speaker pro tem, as we speak right now, the Speaker pro tem of the Republican-dominated Texas House is an anti-Second Amendment, open borders, BLM activist Democrat. Speaker pro tem of the Texas House. Not one Democrat has had their seniority taken away. They didn't even take away their parking spots. Instead, they were greeted with hugs. They were warmly embraced by House leadership when they finally returned. And multiple of them, as I said, not only are they not being punished, Republican bills are being pushed aside to prioritize the Democrat bills written by Democrats with Democrat authors in this special session. Just by way of example, House Bill 10. So the number 10 highest priority bill for this entire special session was handed to one of the Democrats who fled the state to break quorum to thwart the Republican agenda. So this Democrat bill was prioritized over 81 other Republicans who all had bills this special session.
Insane.
So Republicans, not only in Texas, we're not fighting, we're rewarding the Democrats.
Wow. Insane. And that's got to change. Brian Harrison, really appreciate the update. That's all the time that we have. You can always follow me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net.